Hello, everyone. Welcome to this week's episode of Revenue Renegades. I'm Doug Campbell-John, CEO and founder of Coffee. And with me this week, I am proud to be joined by Santosh Sharan, the CEO and co-founder of ZeerAI. Santosh has an amazing career. Like, I could take the next 10 minutes just going through his background, but a few highlights. He's the former COO of retention.com/RB2B, co-CEO of Contact Out, president and CEO of Apollo.io. You may have heard of them. Another little company that he was the VP of Growth and Strategy at called Zoom Info. So, needless to say, I reached out to Santosh early on when we were starting Coffee to pick his brain about data, and he's got lots of wisdom and insights on that. But I'm really excited for this conversation. So, welcome to the show, Santosh.
Thank you, Doug. Excited to be here. Looking forward to our conversation.
As a fellow founder, we always ask the same question in the beginning. Tell me all about your new company, Zeer.ai, what it's about, and how'd you come up with the idea?
Sure. Doug, I was trying to remember the first time I met you was almost 15 years ago when you were starting FlipTop, right? And both of us have seen the modern go-to-market stack being built, right? From the days like 20 years ago when we saw, like when we use Excel spreadsheets, right?
Mhm.
But during this time, I think we broke go-to-market with extreme automation, extreme efficiency, and a little bit of greed, right? So, um, what worked before no longer works, right? The sales math is completely broken, right? Reps are taking all these meetings, meaningless meetings, right? The marketing channels, all of them suck right now, right? If you look at emails, most of them are going into spam. Phone, nobody picks up any more phone from unknown numbers, right? So last December, I was musing and kind of sharing my frustration with go to market, how I felt like this was the end of an era and something new had to come up with my friend Amit, who is the co-founder of Clearbit. So he sold Clearbit to HubSpot, and he was thinking about what to do next. And I met him in San Francisco at the lobby of Hotel Nico in December, and 1 hour meeting went into 3 hours, where we said something's got to happen, and a lot of the ventures that we see in go-to-market are taking very small stab of it, and not they're trying to improve the existing system, right? So rather than come up with an entirely new system, right, which is also risky and difficult, but that's what we are doing with Zier. So that's our founding story. Amit and I, 4 weeks after that evening, I had left RB2B. uh, and earlier this year, in March, we were joined by David, who's also our CTO, also came from HubSpot and Clearbit. He was one of the early team members, and now we are a few more folks. So we have spent a few months now thinking about how we solve this problem. And the first solution involves automating the top of the funnel in go to market, and the reason is very simple. Our research showed that about 50% of the sales spend is in top of the funnel, is in
Right.
trying to negotiate, trying to get leads, and uh, a lot of the cycle goes into outreach, both from sellers and but also from buyers and when they're trying to evaluate vendors. Right? There's a lot of cycle invested in. So we thought, why not build an AI agent for seller and for buyer and let them very comprehensively negotiate with each other. So the experience for the seller is that when a meeting is booked, it's with a highly engaged buyer that has already raised their hand. And the experience for the buyer is that they go to a platform and say, hey, I want to buy this solution. And they get highly vetted vendors that are aligned to exactly what they're looking for. We are also building in subsequent stages a research platform for a buyer. So they are able to solve problem, not just come there to get leads. But that's kind of in a nutshell what we are looking to develop.
So let's talk about the research agent. I just want to double click on that a little bit. How does that so today probably the best solution is somebody goes to g2.com or ask their friends, as you're researching a solution. How do you think that changes in the future?
Right, right. So once somebody goes to G2 and searches for, say, certain product category or so on, they're already too late. That's very reactive, right? That means they understand that they have a problem,
Mhm.
and that means that they know how to solve their problem. And one of the solution is to buy a product from a category. So if you think about research as a funnel, there are people who show up at G2 or even talk to invest 100K with Gartner, they're very lower in the funnel. Obviously, Gartner much lower than G2, right? Where we see our role is much higher in that funnel, and be very proactive and propose the problems people have. So as part of our agents, we have access to, say, these calls, transcripts, and
Mhm.
so we are beginning to see problems being discussed in companies. And then we are also creating what we are calling synthetic experts. So these experts are like world's best marketer or world's best SMP marketers, right? And we are, we are pumping it data of thousands, if not tens of thousands of SMB marketers. And now buyers have the option to ask questions, run playbooks, get answers and research type queries around topics that are top of mind for them that very week, and in a proactive manner, right? I think that's where research is going.
Hmm.
Very different than the experience G2 provides or Gartner or other provide.
Interesting. And so is the future of my AI buyer agent is gonna be talking to your AI vendor seller agent? Hmm.
Oh, totally. In fact, we already have those agents built internally. In a couple of weeks, we are going to have them discover each other and do our first ever call where a buyer and seller find each other and try to sell and negotiate and book a meeting.
That's awesome. Now, there's folks we had, Amanda from One Mind on the show earlier this year. I think you position yourselves as somewhat different than what she's doing there. How would you describe the differences?
Yeah. So what Amanda is doing, and I have a lot of respect for her and the company, is they're trying to replace a seller,
Mm,
right? And lower in the funnel. They're basically taking over the job of selling.
got it.
So we are not trying to replace the seller. We are much higher in the funnel. So we are trying to extend the presence of the seller to 24 by 7,
Got it.
right? We are trying to qualify those meetings. So if the seller is doing, say, 20 calls a week, they do 20 of the most valuable calls,
Got it.
right? And not 10 of them are valuable, other 10 are junk. So we are trying to cut down on by sending the clone to qualify and do some preliminary conversation and then come back and say, hey, here are the 5 you really want to, or 10 that you really want to focus on. But we still see a role where humans are selling in future. Amanda's vision is probably there'll be less humans selling in future. My vision is there will be humans selling in future. It's just that their quota will double, and there'll be, say, well, if you automate top of the funnel, there'll be less SDRs and less. But I think the humans that sell will just have to drive a lot bigger quota with the same time, and then they'll need tools like us.
Got it. Now, you've talked a lot, in your previous lives and here at Zero about, the doing dozens, if not hundreds, of customer interviews. How startup founders, often get this mode where they spend a bunch of time thinking they're doing market research, and think they've ultimately just got talk to a bunch of friends who have happy ears are going to say nice things to them, and then they think they've got the right idea and go off and make that happen. How do you think? I guess from your experience, multiple occasions now, how do you get secure customer interviews? How do you conduct those interviews so that you're not just kind of hearing what you want to hear? And how do you really understand whether you've got something or not?
Right, right. So this is where I think your background and mine overlap a little bit as well. Both of us come from product. tried training. So having built products, I do realize the importance of like not only getting first party data on some of this, but also tweaking along the way, right? And then there's power in numbers. You can't just talk to, like you said, a friend or few and then use intuition. You really need to talk to hundreds of people, right? And then continually keep evaluating. So, especially when you're early on, like we are, it is really important. And honestly, we have already gone through 2 or 3 micro pivots. Something that 15 years ago, if I was doing this, I would have wasted 2 years of time, and now we wasted like 2 weeks because of this. So here's my playbook, and I actually developed this playbook back in RB2B, so every time I want to do a survey like this, I write a post on
Mhm.
LinkedIn, something relevant to this topic, and then I have this automated script that when people engage with the post, like they like or comment or clearly they're interested in this topic, right? So if I'm uh, I talk about what I'm going to build,
Mhm.
right? And then when people engage, I have a script that scrubs them against my ICP.
Huh.
Say I only want to talk to VP sales or VP marketing, right? And then I drop just a very small line saying, "Hey, I'm building on something related to this. Do you have 15 minutes to talk? And here's my calendar link." So I've done this probably 15 times now across different. Every time it just baffles me how because I drop a calendar link, and within the next 12 hours, boop, 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 my calendar starts filling up for 4 weeks. Like I block 2 or 3 hours in the afternoon, and then I see my calendar fill up for like next several weeks. And I have it just such a miracle. And these are all inbound meetings coming in. I don't send emails to anyone. I don't have to. And these are senior folks that I scrub them, so they're very relevant for my journey, right? And the reason is this: when you write LinkedIn posts, you're already given value to them. So for a few hours, they remember your name and they remember you. You have this hello effect or like a micro celebrity effect, which 12 hours later, they'll forget anything about me, right? So if I have an ask within the few hours of giving them a value, I get about 50 to 70% conversion.
That's amazing. Are you using an off-the-shelf tool for this, or is this something custom you built for doing the kind of
Yeah,
automatic
I think they
outreach?
used a API from one of these off-the-shelf tools. So, but there are literally like 50 of them out there. Uh, yeah, it's not exactly like I couldn't configure it to because I have to bounce it across data enrichment and so on. So we just use the API, which logs into my LinkedIn and
That sounds like a product, Santosh. I don't know. Yeah. And what when you're doing these interviews, what kind of questions do you find are leading you to the most valuable insights?
I can't say I've mastered that. I've mastered anytime I need meetings like 50 or 100, I mastered that reliably. But I feel like interviewing these candidates is an art by itself.
Mhm.
Um, I I try to have like 2 or 3 templates because I don't trust I'm asking the right question. I don't trust they're giving me the right answers. Or I look for the wisdom on crowd, like more people. I try to get a sense. I do record like structured. I ask structured questions and record structured response, but then I keep 10, 15 minutes just to kind of have an open-ended
Okay.
question as well. Um, I'm trying to really dive into what I don't know. It just makes it very difficult, right? And the risk that I have in, so I try to validate my product, validate my risks, and then I try to understand what I don't know. And that's where I get all different kinds of answers, and I try to find a pattern. Once I've spoken to, like when I was doing RB2B, before we even built or launched, I spoke to probably 250 people in like 6 weeks, and it was very clear. At the beginning, there was a lot of confusion. In 2 weeks in, there was more confusion than answers because everybody was talking about different. But then after 4 or 6 weeks, there was a distinct pattern I could point to. So yeah, that's kind of Once you talk to hundreds of people, you find what's dominant.
Yeah, I think it's always an interesting question of like what is a complaint versus it's kind of the vitamin aspirin analogy. What is something that people are like, yeah, that's a pain versus that's something I'll pay for, and those are not always the same thing.
Not not at all. And
Yeah,
it's so difficult. I can't claim I can always understand like in a few 2 years.
got it. So you said that the B2B go to market is broken, right? What do you think is the most broken part about it, and how companies are approaching GTM today, and what do you think that future looks like?
Yeah. So the future part is kind of the interesting, but let me talk about some fundamental shifts that I see,
Okay.
and then I'll come to the question of what's broken and then how we see the future. So let me ask you, since you're doing CRM,
Mhm.
how many CRM do you think there were 20 years ago? Clearly, Salesforce was there,
Yeah.
uh, but then how many more? By the way, I don't know the answer. I'm guessing maybe 30, maybe 50,
I was gonna say dozens, it would be my
dozens,
guess.
maybe, right?
Yeah.
So let's say 35. Just
Mhm,
I mean, that may be right, something in that. So if G2 was there at that time, I don't know if they were. So they would have 35 vendors, right?
mhm.
And how many are there today? I checked 2 weeks ago, so I know the number today.
What's the number?
768 as of 2 weeks ago.
Wow. Yeah.
So so what that tells me, I mean, this is an observation. In next 5 years, what's your guess? What would that number be?
I assume it's gonna keep 10Xing.
Right. So it'll clearly be at least a few thousand, maybe three, four, 5,000. Right. So the trend here and what we're observing is happening with every single industry vertical, and this is a fundamental shift, and this will have an impact on everything, right? And let me explain how. So there are cost of developing a tool is going down, and with AI, it's only going to get accelerated, right? So what happened in 20 years will happen in next 3 years, right? With AI, eventually you'll be able to copy any tool, right?
Mhm.
Salesforce invests, let's say, think about the product team at Salesforce. They excited about a feature, they invest like 10 months, build something, right? They launch, and within 2 weeks, all the other CRMs copy and because there's parity. It's so easy to, right? And they did all the market research, and others don't have to do it, right? And we saw that even with our B2B, right, which is a much simpler tool, but then there were so many replicas, right? And 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 that's not a one-off. That's going to happen and continue to happen at an accelerated pace. So, and there's a good side to it. I know as founders, this is like probably bothers us, but the good side is there's going to be a CRM for every market niche possible.
Right.
There'll be a CRM for lawnmowers or for carpenters, or like earlier they would all buy Salesforce, but now they don't have to. So it does fulfill. There'll be CRM which will be packaged as an agency with 1%, 2% running. All they want is 10 customer and they're happy, right? So what this does, it changes the investment model because VCs loved the product premiums
Mhm.
or winner take all models. When you're going to have like 4,000 tool in a given category, you cannot charge a super premium, right? Unless
Right.
you have something differentiated. And I have a feeling a lot of the bigger SaaS companies will start losing. So there'll be a downward pricing pressure. The selling will change because imagine as a buyer having to like remember like 20 years ago, buying a CRM was easy. Now, how do you evaluate in like hundreds? And it's not just CRM, by the way. Every tool is going through this explosion, right? So then buying that there's a tax or a search cost to it. So that has to change, right? I think we'll end up with uh, far more efficient businesses with like those 6 people teams running. The market will get distributed amongst many vendors and very personalized solutions. And I think in the process, we'll just have less people working in the workforce. Then a lot of those people that leave the workforce are the ones that are going to create these additional tools as agencies. So there'll be a ton more agencies, ton more tools, and this in some ways I think is exciting. It's just a new way to do go to market, and AI will play a very big role.
So a few themes I picked out of that. One is which is, lots of niche or personalized products, specialized products, much smaller teams. I think it's an interesting question about the future of venture capital in terms of, like people doing B, C, D, up the alphabet rounds versus not needing to. It sounds like all of this stuff is connected.
They're all connected, and within this, I think there will be positive outcomes. So there will be, when I say there will be pricing pressure downwards, it seems like there will be no big companies, right? No billion-dollar or unique. On the contrary, I think there will be super big companies
Mhm.
or a lot of like much smaller companies. So the market will get polarized. So and the VCs will chase these super big, like companies like Cursor or some of those with like 20 people, 30 people team, they're getting to like hundreds of million in revenue,
Right.
right? And there will be outcomes. And the reason this is happening is because we are also live in a world where we are all super connected,
Mhm.
right? So think about distribution that has collapsed into singularity, where good ideas overnight can get like oversubscribed at hype, right? Which would take 10 years or years in the past, like 20 years ago, to get that level of distribution. So VCs would it the spread changes for the investors, but then they would chase these life-changing opportunities that will, in fact, uh, one big win paid for like the 8 or 9 not so great outcomes. Now I think one big win will pay for like 30 not so great outcomes, right? So the VC math changes, but also I think some of the VC capital are less risk. They'll go after like 20 million, 50 million outcomes, like semi bootstrap. They'll figure out ways to like monetize those as well, and not just look for the unicorns.
Yeah, I had Max Altschuler from GTM Fund on the show recently, and he talked a lot about, he thinks there's just going to be a lot of companies that either will bootstrap, as you've done or have talked about, or they go out for a kind of pre-seed or seed and maybe an A, and that's it. They're done, right? There's no need for more capital past that point because they're so efficient. So I think that's going to be one end of the market, and then I think to your point, I think there will be. Um, more of these platform plays and consolidation plays, right? You take a look at the kind of the ripplings in the HR space where they're kind of collapsing a lot of that stack. And I think there's more of those that will end up emerging as the bigger players and folks who are just kind of solving one piece of that problem. If you solve one piece of the problem and you've raised a lot of money, that's a tough place to be.
That's a very tough place to be in. And you brought up a very interesting point. Compound startups or
Mhm.
platforms, I think we'll see a lot more of it. And the reason is simple, right? Because earlier technology was a kind of a barrier, or getting good experience was a barrier. Now, customer acquisition will be the barrier, right? AI will ensure that there's parity in experience, right? So then, if you have a customer, you want to fulfill all other, like give them, like you get want to get expand into all the market adjacencies, right? And so you want to become a rippling, assuming it's easier, it'll get easier and easier to build more technology. So what that means is, yeah, there'll be more and more platform plays, but also, I think endpoint solutions will partner. If they can't build their own platform, they'll all there'll be new kind of partnerships and collaboration that'll emerge. Where ad hoc, I think there'll be platforms that'll glue multiple endpoint solutions together to
Right.
compete with real platforms.
Yeah, I think, whether it ends up being the kind of end state, but just like the concept of MCP, right? The Anthropic protocol for connecting systems is an interesting, just like we had, early days of the internet with HTTP and other protocols. This idea of like how do systems interconnect and talk to each other, I think allows that to happen in a way where people aren't writing, and obviously there's a lot of companies that have become these in between companies that are aggregating APIs. So I think there's a bunch of different approaches to make that, again, a lot simpler than what it was before.
Totally, that's the hope. I think through change we get better.
Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about the data market because you've also seen, lots of changes going on there. How do you see kind of data evolving and kind of its importance to plays in the go-to-market stack?
Yeah, that's a space that will undergo massive, I
Mhm.
think, change. On one hand, data fuels AI, and everything AI knows um, is based on the data we feed it, right?
Mhm.
On the other hand, the data in go-to-market was generally third-party structured data, right? Which is and mostly circled around company and contact, and there's billions, if not tens of billions, of revenue being done around that, right? I think that market, I have less and less. I think the value of that space overall will decrease because AI now not. So let me share my understanding of the how the data ecosystem kind of evolves. Right,
Mhm.
it started from the telephone book where we go through these periods of expansion. There's too much data, and then there's contraction where there's too less data because we come up with the technology like tech install or calling or intent. So we try to make sense of too much data through these technologies, right? So
Right.
we are going through this period of data abundance,
Mhm.
right? And then AI is again one of those intent type technology that will make sense of too much data because having nobody to call is as bad as having 100,000 people to call. Like, where do I start? I can't call everyone anyway. Give me a list of 10, right? So that's where technologies um, help. I think what is going to happen is a lot of the power and value will shift from third party structured data to first party unstructured and structured data, and then third party unstructured data, right? So I should say first party structured and third party unstructured data. Third party unstructured is LLMs and so on. But first party data um, is going to become really important, which most companies are just dropping into the floor. There's no tool to manage, and they're not data company. They don't know what to do with. Um, I think the amount of first party data will just keep on growing, and eventually somebody will figure out how to make sense of it. Um, but yes, the third party data is already quite a bit commoditized. It's just a few companies know how to turn that into structured data. The reason why this is in future, this is going to be less useful is not because the data itself changes shit. The data is the same data. It's on people like us, and you know, the problem is the channel that we use to activate this data was email and phone and LinkedIn. That channel is completely wrecked, right? So what do you do with this data? Yeah, there is still some use case where you can enrich and find, but that's like 10% of the overall use case.
So, obviously players, and you have tons of experience at Apollo, Zoom Info was one disruptor and then Apollo disrupted, Zoom Info at some level. Not that Zoom Info has gone away and doing quite
Oh yeah.
well. Um, but, can you give so obviously all the classic firmographic, individuals information about like phone numbers and emails and titles and LinkedIn profiles, as you mentioned, is kind of like the classic third party structured data right now. Can you give examples when you're talking about structured first party data as well as unstructured third party data?
Yeah, I'll I'll give you an specific example. So ironically, uh, LinkedIn
Mhm.
is one of those companies that is sitting on the most valuable data set. And you know this better. I don't know enough about LinkedIn, but from the outside, I don't even think they look as their identity as a data company. They look at their identity as a recruitment company, not even marketing and sales. But example of good third party unstructured data is the best intent data is on LinkedIn,
Yeah.
right? And people are trying to like create some structured intent information out of that, but the real value is getting an LLM to point to it and say, okay, who are the people on LinkedIn this week that showed some interest in consuming content around the business I sell it, right? Or so you can mine that information, and it could be a like on somebody or commented. So there's a lot of info. It's relatively easy for LinkedIn or others out there to kind of infer personalized intent information and then use that for uh, outreach,
Mhm.
right? I think the real value is in real time signals and contextual signals. Like, what is top of mind for me this week? That's the only thing I'm going to accept, right? Not what was top of mind 3 months ago,
Right.
right?
Right.
Which is the third party data we have that is being sold today, right? Which is the marketplace we have created, and we're selling data on like what has been top of mind 6 months ago, or which I've completely forgotten, right? So
Right. 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 And then what about the first party internal data when you're talking about those kind of
yeah,
things?
so the first party data needs to this is something our B2B started, right? People that visit our website, which is completely anonymous,
Yeah.
but they do know that we exist,
Huh?
except unless they fill up a form or you. So now by de-anonymizing, you can utilize that was some data that could be uh, that's a value that was unlocked because of now think about in CRM. There's so much of data that people engage with, like events. That's first party too. People show up on booth, but they are anonymous,
Right.
right? Or uh, there still are pockets of anonymous data in organizations, like what we unlocked with RB2B. But I had made a list that was 1 out of 10 such opportunities where somebody needs to unlock all of them and then go after them. A lot of them are in CRM, by the way. But most businesses just drop it to the floor, and they all the budget goes into new or acquiring new sort of folks
Right.
rather than exist. And there's one other actually trend that leads to the value of first party data. If you think about 10 years ago or 15 years ago, most of sales was acquiring new customers,
Right.
and you were selling something where the buyers had no idea. They were first time buyer in that product, right?
Mhm.
Because like 2005 or 2008 or 10, a lot of the SaaS you're selling to first time buyers.
Right.
Today, 100% of the market is comparative displacements. Everybody you're trying to sell to already has a similar product,
Right.
right? So that changes the way you sell, the way, and this is where I think first party data becomes very useful. It's very likely you've encountered who your next customer is in the last 5 years, 10 years,
Mhm.
right? So mining that information, but also having a really good history of what the customer did or prospect did during that time, and how what you have so role of product marketing becomes more and more important, and role of competitive kind of differentiation becomes more and more important, which 10, 15 years ago you could get by without having to know enough about your competitors.
Huh. How do you, are there GTM kind of practices that you see I mean, we talked obviously about email and phone and kind of LinkedIn stuff, but are there other GTM practices that you just think are going to be obsolete in the next 5 years?
I look at future reps
Mhm.
being a mix between a management consultant and social influencer. So what I mean by that, and everybody. So if you think about the sales reps, well, I mean, last 10, 15 years, we have run into a lot of very young, green face folks, well intentioned but with no experience, still being very successful at selling because of this phenomena. Because they didn't need to know enough about the product or domain they were selling. I feel like within the next 3 years, a lot of those roles will just disappear,
Mhm.
and then you'll have a handful of rep, and the future of sales is with very senior people selling,
Yeah.
not managing teams, right? Because we bloated teams because of all these automation tools and so on, and now we are going to shrink those teams where there were 100 people. Now we are going to have 15, and these 15 folks would be really good at understanding, like strategic understanding
Mhm.
of the space, right? And everybody will be selling AI agent because all SaaS will be AI agent, right?
Yeah.
So now when you're selling AI agent, it'll the pitch. will be how this agent is going to affect your bottom line and top line and financial ROI. And no longer you can't just stay away from like showing real ROI, right?
Right.
So this is where I think uh, somebody well versed in uh, like a combination of product marketing and a management consultant and a senior enterprise rep is the future. And then the distribution. This rep will talk about what they do on social. So when they move from one company to another, they take out their entire audience to the new company and the customers. And because um, brands will be created not by branding teams, but by individuals, right? Just like what Adam is doing with RB2B. And like, when was the last time you and I read what, say, Salesforce or Microsoft or Google handles wrote? But we do trust what their employees say all the time,
Yeah.
right? So these sales reps or senior reps would be the expert in their field. So they'll talk about it all the time and people will trust and make decisions. And then they'll be the one getting commissions. And then they'll take ownership of the future companies like revenue projections. And yeah, I look at it as a beautiful wall. That's
Yeah, I think so. So it's interesting. Just pulling on the thread. I think what's so fascinating to me is that the more we're kind of handing over certain parts of this process to AI and to technology, the kind of personal interactions, the personal brand, the personal trust, all of that becomes more and more important. I'm hearing more, I'm hearing and seeing and witnessing firsthand, face-to-face meetings, dinners, right? Building these personal brands where you're being vulnerable online, where people can kind of come and interact with you and trust you rather than some nameless, faceless, corporate brand is really what it's about. So I think more of the kind of the rote stuff, and I think this is what I'm excited about what you're doing at Zier, is the road stuff where you're like, listen, I know I want to go solve this problem, or maybe even this problem is I'm not aware I have this problem, but this can be presented to me in a way where I can take my human bias out of that and kind of do the first level pass at like help me understand for my specific needs and my specific environment, what's out there and how do you parse through this world that's getting, as you said, like 10x more filled with vendors each day. And then ultimately, it's still going to come down to me having a trusted relationship with a person as opposed to just a faceless company.
Yeah, so well put. Thank you. And we have seen this in B2C, right? Where there are more
Mhm.
choices
Yeah.
and then brand matters because that's how we create trust. And in B2B, we could keep track of those choices. Uh, but then now we are reaching a point when there are thousands or 10,000 software. These brand and trust of people that are close to me will matter a lot more than it did in the last 10 years.
Yeah. Maybe that's why Mark Benioff finally got on LinkedIn. I don't know if he's doing any posts himself, but we'll see. We'll see about how Mark does there.
He's doing
Um,
well to having gotten into this late.
Yeah, yeah, just late to the game. So, let me shift gears for a minute. You've talked a lot about kind of personal habits and personal productivity, and I know you've made some kind of personal changes in some of the things. Can you just talk about like what are some of the things that you do in your own personal life to help boost your kind of entrepreneur creativity and productivity?
Sure. So I walk and I run. That clears up my mind. I have reduced coffee quite a bit. I want to give it up completely, but sometimes I do drink. But for the all practical purpose, I don't drink caffeine. I do sauna quite a bit.
Oh,
Uh, well, at least twice a day. That helps me. So sauna and running,
uh-huh.
or just brisk walking, are two sort of habits that I found that help me get rid of coffee and that clears up my brain. Whenever it starts to fog or I need a good idea, I live in the East Bay where the landscapes are great. I'm like 5 minutes away from very good walking trails. So I make full use of it.
It's that theme has come up very often, the kind of just getting out into nature. A number of, entrepreneurs, have talked about sauna and or cold plunging. So I'm not sure I can be with you there on the giving up caffeine, but it's admirable. It's admirable. I definitely have cut back, but I'm still at least a 2 or 3 cup a day guy. So,
Nice, nice. I do love coffee though.
yeah, it tastes good. It does taste good.
Yes.
What do you just, besides the things you just mentioned, what do you like to do for fun?
I watch movies. I used to play soccer a lot.
Okay.
Now I don't. Well, I'm also like probably not good at it. But in school and college and a
Mhm.
little bit later, I really love playing soccer. Here, I don't know if you played soccer, but now that I'm starting a company, I find that a lot of my decision making is comes from playing soccer because when you're dribbling that ball, you need to have like 360-degree view of where you are, right? Like in entrepreneurship, and you're constantly looking for a white space or like a to pass the ball, and you get these opportunities. They come and go, right? And you have to leverage it, just like in entrepreneurship, right? I'm looking for the next small opportunity to, and then it's a team sport. It's not like sports where one person can be a hero. Here, the whole team wins or fails at the same time. So yeah, I'm finding that entrepreneurship is more and more like playing soccer.
I love the analogy. I played a little bit of soccer, and I've also heard people describe it. Football similar. American football. Um, I think what's the other thing that's amazing is you can't overthink things, right? You don't have time to plan something out. So much of that is just kind of like your instinct, and you develop that instinct over time, obviously, and it gets better from pattern recognition. But if you're sitting there thinking about like what position, what formation are we in, or
That's
like
so
trying,
well put.
can't do
That's
it.
so well put because your goal is there, but then it's like a hive mind, and
Mhm.
all you can do is hand over well, right? Which is like communication, right? You hand over and you hope you get to the goal, but you can't really control it.
Have you watched the show Welcome to Wrexham?
No, I haven't.
Okay, so I'm gonna recommend that one
Okay.
too. And it's kind of like, I mean, I like soccer, but I've really, the story of them taking over this small team, in England, and I think again, back to your analogy of building a company, I think as you're moving up in leagues, it's also one of those things where it's like, hey, listen, you might have a player that's been amazing in getting you to that stage, but they're not the right person to go take it to the Premier League, to that next level. And so it is, you know, y- I do I have very familial companies, but like my job is not to make you have friends. My job is to make sure that we are building, you know, the best possible team we can, and it's sometimes that means, you're upgrading players along the way. So we could milk this analogy for a long time.
That's true. Yeah, I love it. I love it. I think you guys think similar there.
Yeah. So what is I'm also just a product nerd in general. So is there a product that you use or love in your personal life that you swear by and would recommend to others?
If you had asked my question like this question like 12 months ago or 18 or any time in the last 5, 10 years, I would think about a product with an interface and so on. But I'm surprised at how many times I use my ChatGPT subscription.
Mhm. Yeah.
Probably like 50 times a day, or like I started with just I wanted to correct my English or so, right? When I first used. Now I'm validating some very deep like thoughts, like research type thoughts, or uh, validating philosophical ideas, and
Mhm.
getting into that has become a glimpse into like all knowledge I try to get. And O3 Mini has become my best friend. So yeah, even though I don't know if that qualifies for the
Oh,
product
yeah.
you're looking for because there's no interface and it's just a LLM. But yeah, I'm just so dependent on it at this point.
I was so skeptical. I'm bounce back and forth. I'm kind of Perplexity by default, but I'll bounce over to ChatGPT or Claude at different times. But I think uh, I was always so skeptical, probably from just previous Siri and, Alexa experiences with voice interfaces. And most recently, like the Perplexity voice interface is just so good. I'll kind of mount my phone in the car and I'll be driving somewhere and I'll basically just have a conversation about something. And it's incredible, right? And then you can always go back and you've got the history of it for you, in your log. So Yeah, that's and is what I love. Sam or someone at OpenAI said recently, this is the worst it will ever be. Right? If you think about how amazing it is already today, it's only going to get better from here. So that's also what's incredible in what we're all building.
Yeah, it feels like the beginning of the internet days, right? It's
Oh yeah.
just so much building going on, and it's very exciting where you're headed, and confusing in many
Oh, yeah.
ways.
Well, you and I both have enough, kinda gray hair and road miles to remember that. I would say this is like, this is more exciting in a lot of ways than what the internet was, and the internet was pretty damn exciting. So I'm sitting here kind of in the, latter part of my career going like, "This is the most fun I've ever had," and, like, we're just, but it is. I can't imagine how somebody, unlike us who is not in this field and, getting this fire hose of updates and information thrown at them every day has any way of making sense of it, right? So it is kinda wild. In some ways, it's just kinda buckle up and hang on.
Yeah, yeah. I don't know if you have time, but what's your perspective on the impact on the workforce? The internet was generally positive,
I'm an I think this is part of being an entrepreneur, and I'm an optimist by nature.
right?
I do think that, like, if you look at the long arc of history, it kind of, is up and to the right. I think if you zoom the aperture out enough, I'm very positive. If you go in very close, right, we can go into these moments in time where you're gonna have big job disruptions, or there's obviously lots of unrest in the world right now. But I do think that, overall, it's gonna allow people a lot more freedom to do these kind of micro companies as you talked about. It's gonna free us up to do higher level thinking. Like one of the analogies I use is when I was there in the first days when kind of digital video editing came about and digital audio tools came about. And what I heard from the filmmakers who would use tools like Avid was it just lets me leave more on the cutting floor. It lets me try a lot more things. And the end result is I have a lot more room for my creativity as opposed to within this period of time, I only have time for 3 cuts. I better, go with my best one. So just have a lot more choice. And I do think it is that level, just like we were saying, you're having a conversation with Perplexity or ChatGPT of how do you research something much faster? Like in the old days where it would be like, I have to go look it up in an encyclopedia. Then you have the internet where you can go research it. Now you actually have a brain working for you and
Right.
doing that. And so I'm incredibly bullish on what it's going to do. I do think that there'll be a lot of job disruption,
Yeah,
and I do think there'll be a lot of hopefully flight to higher value
yeah.
stuff. But I hope it spawns a lot more entrepreneurs.
Yeah, I love your response. Very aligned to it. Yeah, there'll be some disruption in the short run, but we humans are, we are so resilient
Yeah,
to these disruptions. We'll figure a way out.
yeah. Well, Santosh, I feel like I could talk to you forever, but we're kind of running up on time here. So, just final question: kind of how can listeners stay in touch with you and Zier and help you on your mission?
Yeah, thank you. We are onboarding alpha and beta customers or prospects. If you want to get into a pipeline, happy to onboard you. But to reach out, my email is santosh@zeer.ai. And I'm always on LinkedIn if you want to use your LinkedIn email to reach me.
Definitely follow Santosh. He posts amazing stuff, and go check out Zier. Santosh, thank you so much for your time today. Great to chat with you, my friend.
Thanks, Doug. Always good talking to you.